Welcome to this week's Game of Politics. I'm your host, Dalen Wingard, with Regina Fang and Doug Stutter. This week, we'll be discussing money in politics. And Doug, you will start by talking about the history of campaign financing.
Thanks, Dalen. It really starts in the 70s with the original campaign finance law of 1971. It set, for example, a limit of $1,000 that anyone could contribute to an individual candidate for an office. After it was passed in 1971, the Supreme Court modified it slightly, striking down several provisions. That was the law for 30 some odd years. In 2002, McCain-Feingold, or more technically BICRA, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, came into effect. And BICRA, it set out to do a number of things. One is it readjusted the hard money contributions, and it actually indexed hard contributions to inflation. More importantly, BICRA really changed soft money, that is money used by third-party groups to influence campaigns. So these are third-party groups, PACs, super PACs, things like this, that sought to run campaigns or commercials that weren't directly for Obama or for John Kerry, but they sought to influence the election by saying negative or positive things about them. And BICRA sought to limit that. For example, none of these ads could run within 30 days of primaries or 60 days of a general campaign. This was modified at various points in time, but the big modification was, of course, in 2010 with Citizens United. And Citizens United was a conservative lobbying group. And the Supreme Court very famously overturned 100 years of precedent and said that associations, corporations, and unions could spend as much of their money as they wanted directly to elect or defeat campaigns, individual candidates. Since that time, as we know, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent by corporations and unions and associations directly on campaigns. So what the court really says is, look, anybody can spend any amount of money because that's free speech. Again, the counter-argument is that you probably don't have $150 million to spend advertising, whereas Exxon or the Koch brothers have $150 million and they're willing to spend it. Dalen, where do you fall on this question?
I do believe that people can spend whatever money that they want to because it is their money. Like, it's good to finance campaigns and help them out and put money towards it because it is a big deal. It is our political system.
Regina, what do you think? We had the first $1 billion election. I think in 2008, 2012 was even more money. Do you agree that we're spending too much money on elections in the U.S.?
Well, not necessarily. I don't think that this money should be used towards anything else. I mean, campaigning is a very important process for voters to be acknowledged as to what party they should vote for. And a lot of the voters, when they don't know that much background about a certain party, they do look towards campaigns.
What I hear you saying is elections are important and we should spend money on them because it matters.
Yes.
So, Dalen, I understand that you've been looking at specifically doing some research on where the money's coming from, who's contributing, what groups are contributing, how the parties are doing. What did you find?
I found some interesting points. I looked at opensecrets.org, and they told me that the total population over 18 years of age is 235 million, around that roughly. And they said that 0.53% gives more than $200. Males give 0.67% and females give 0.32%. And people that give over 2,500 is 0.10%. Why do you think males give more than females?
Yeah, I suspect the answer is probably that if you look at the top 100 most wealthy people in the country, it's predominantly men, so they're tending to give more of the big donations than women are. And I also think the other factor may be that women just don't prioritize the giving to political campaigns as much as men do.
What do you think, Regina?
Well, I definitely agree with Doug's last point. I feel like women have a less of a priority, thinking that they want to spend. They prefer spending less money towards campaign stuff that doesn't involve their immediate families.
Now we'll go over to Regina with the Tea Party debate.
So a little background information on the Tea Party movement. It is an American political movement that advocates strict devotion to the United States Constitution by reducing U.S. government spending and taxes and reduction of the United States national debt and federal deficit. The name of the movement was derived from the Boston Tea Party of 1773. The Tea Party movement is not easily defined because it comprises of hundreds of groups at the grassroots level of varying sizes, influences, and priorities. It is highly factionalized with no clear leadership or centralized structure. So there has been much debate on this Tea Party movement because many assume that it is a grassroots movement. However, there has been other sides of the argument which stating that it is an astroturf. So what do you guys think? Is it a grassroots movement or is it an astroturf?
Well, it's a good question, Regina. I think the popular perception, what most people think clearly, is that the Tea Party is a grassroots movement. And I think it is. For many of the people involved, it is a grassroots movement. However, it's hard to avoid the fact that I think that a lot of the money that is supporting the movement and that's being funneled in the name of the Tea Party towards campaigns is coming from several, a small number of large donors, most famously the Koch brothers. Now, the interesting thing is that these independent groups are locally structured, and they aren't just the Wichita Tea Party movement, but they go to conferences, they go to conventions, they organize into these educational things, rallies in Washington, and these things are funded by these large groups. A lot of these Tea Party groups, famously back candidates other than the Republican Party. So often Republican candidates are losing to Tea Party candidates in primaries and then going on to win the general election. So it seems to be funded by large groups and special interests, organized as a grassroots movement, and behave very unpredictably.
So it's made up of small groups, but basically kept in the game with large organizations.
I think that's probably a fair way to put it. It would be much less influential without that big money.
Yeah.
But the big money
is helping them a lot.
It doesn't necessarily control how they all behave at various points in time, because they are pretty independent and they do some, frankly, crazy stuff politically at times.
Well, that's a very good point that you guys made. So I guess my overall question is, what do you guys think the trends are in money and politics?
A couple of things jump out for me. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, the movement to these 501c groups, these are the groups that supposedly are social welfare groups. The defining feature for them is that they don't have to make public who's donating the money. So, for example, when we look at the Koch brothers, we know they spent $200 million in 10 years, but we have no idea how much money they've funneled through 501c groups into the election. It could be another $100 million, we don't know. So I think that's something over the next number of years that probably Congress is going to have to address. And the other thing I think, Dalen, and you mentioned this, so you might want to talk more about it, is just the overall total amount of money we're spending.
I do believe that the money amount put into it is useful, but at the same time unnecessary. If we go back to the free speech thing, like sometimes we don't have control over how much money is put into it because people are willingly giving money sometimes. So, I mean, it's their way of contributing to their beliefs, I guess. So,
yeah, it's a tough question, I agree.
That concludes this week's episode of Money in Politics. Thank you for watching.